Welcome to Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in the San Gabriel Valley today, and we are joined by Peter Chan. He is a councilman in the city of Monterey Park, and we're actually going to be spending a good amount of time with Mr. Chan. He is here to discuss a sad chapter in American history, and I thought it so important that I wanted to speak with you in an extended format to talk about it. As our viewers may or may not know, Monterey Park is fortunate in that it has many people of Chinese descent living in Monterey Park. Give us a sense of the rich history, diversity of Monterey Park and its Chinese Americans.
Now, originally, Monterey Park is 95% whites and 5% of the rest.
Right.
And now it's 67% Asians, 27% Latinos, and only 5% whites.
Of the 67% who are of Asian descent, are the vast majority Chinese?
Over 55% are Chinese.
So there's other Asian cultures as well. That
there's Koreans, Filipinos, Japanese.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vietnamese.
I want to speak with you about the topic at hand, and that is what's known as the Chinese Exclusion Act. We've been hearing a little bit about it, given the mood, not just in America, but around the world as it relates to immigrants and refugees. And so I thought it would be a great time to talk about the Chinese Exclusion Act, signed back in 1882 by President Chester Arthur. Tell us about it.
Sure. And it's 135 years ago exactly.
Right.
It was signed into law on May 6th, 1882. Now, I would like to go back to history in China because I want to talk about the push and the pull force that why this happened. So I want to take everyone back to 1841.
Okay.
That is the Opium War in China. That's the British against the Chinese Qing dynasty.
Right.
And then on 1842, Nanking Treaty was signed, and that's the time the Qing dynasty ceded Hong Kong to British.
And you happen to be from Hong Kong.
Exactly.
So, side note, but important.
And so from that time on, Qing dynasty was very corrupt and is politically and economically is going nowhere, and people are very poor.
Right.
So people are seeking ways to help themselves to get some way out of the poverty and find a better life elsewhere.
And so they find the United States of America.
Exactly.
The Wild West, much of it not even part of the official union. They were still territories.
Right.
But there was a need for labor, especially,
because in 1850, San Francisco discovered gold.
Right, the gold rush.
So it is the gold rush. So that's the pull factor, and the corruption in China is the push factor.
Right.
So they need a lot of labor to dig gold. So, but within the 10 years period, all the gold gone.
Right. Yeah, they took it out of the ground. By 1860, it was done.
And that is done.
Right.
But then it's right after that, then it's the railroad.
Right. And that's
Transcontinental Railroad. And that even need more laborers to work on the railroad.
And what we know about that time is there were huge numbers of Chinese men working on the railroads under questionable conditions.
Exactly. And it's not just Chinese men, but also people from Europe, from South America, from Africa, everywhere in the world that they need laborers that they can get a hand on. They will ship them to America to help on building the railroad.
And so it's undeniable that the Chinese who had come from China were a very significant part of this boom, the railroad boom, and they were welcome for a time because the labor was needed. But by the 1880s, I believe, was that when we had the insurance crisis? I mean, there was a recession in the late 1870s,
well,
I believe.
Even before that.
Okay.
1865, that's the end of the Civil War.
Of course.
Right after the Civil War is the economic depression.
Right.
Because it's always like that. And so, and the Transcontinental Railroad was built in 1969.
1869,
it's done.
yeah.
Done. And then the laborers has nowhere to go, right? No more railroads to build. Only small ones branch out from the main Continental Railroad. And then Chinese laborers were dispersed everywhere. So they went to the Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley at the Delta, and do the irrigation because China is an agricultural country. So they help in building the canals, the levees, and help a lot of agricultural starting the farms and over there. And we ate cherries, right? Even up to now. So one of the best type is Bing cherry, right?
Right.
B-I-N-G, Bing cherry. And there's not an English word for Bing cherry. It's just because a Chinese named Bing invented or come up with that species of cherry. And so we have Bing cherry until now.
And what we know is a lot of animosity was starting to build against the Chinese because there weren't as many jobs as there had been. And folks felt as if the Chinese were taking jobs from real Americans.
Exactly.
And so take us to what ultimately was the Exclusion Act.
So at that time, it's the Working Men's Party.
Oh, yes.
By then it's Kearney. And so they blame the Chinese to take away the jobs, take away and they do any jobs that's available for lower wages, for any opportunity, they will work at it. But they only do those dirty, and no one wants to do work.
And that sounds a bit familiar when we think about modern day, and we'll talk about that when we return later on in the show, but let's continue. Right. I think it's important that we recognize that.
And at that time, because there's no camera, no cell phones, so there's a lot of cartoons, and you can see a lot of bad stuff that is
the depictions were just
so they would demonize the Chinese.
Vicious.
The reason for that is because the Chinese looks differently, dress differently, talk differently, and everything is so different, and they're not big in number. And so the highest number at that time, according to the U.S. National Census, is only around 100,000 Chinese laborers in the country. So they're easy target, convenient target. So anything goes wrong, blame the Chinese.
Right.
So that's why that leads to 1882.
Right. And again, echoes of today when we think about some of our friends to the south of the border. We'll get there later on. But like you said, 1882, Chester Arthur, the president, signs the Chinese Exclusion Act, which did what?
That is mainly an immigration law that forbids the Chinese coming over to America. And also they cannot be a witness in a court. They cannot buy houses. They cannot, just like ordinary citizens in America, they don't have rights. So they are not even admissible in court. Right. So if they are victimized, they got beat up or they got burglarized or whatever, they cannot even appear to court to accuse the burglar or anyone that do damage to them.
It was devastating. The racial hostility was so dramatic. The Chinese were deemed vile heathens. Right. And the echoes of what happened to the Japanese in America, what happened to the Jews of Europe, what some would say is happening to Latinos today, they're hard to deny.
Yes.
The good news is, and I want to talk about today when we come back, it took decades, even centuries, but ultimately the Chinese Exclusion Act, which had been renewed several times, was ultimately condemned.
Right.
And that happened in
1943.
Right. But even then,
it was not much difference changed.
And it was only in 2011 and 12 where we saw dramatic action to undo the harm of the Chinese Exclusion Act. When we come back, sir, I want to talk about today.
Okay.
And what Monterey Park is doing to remember that time. His name is Peter Chen. We'll be right back on Charter Local Edition.